When Evelyn Ward stepped off that train in Iron Creek, Montana, looking like she'd been through the ringer, the townsfolk started talking. They were all whispering she wouldn't last a week, but they couldn't see what Caleb Rohr saw in her tired eyes, a fire that burned just as hot as his own. Here's the story of a woman who showed up with nothing to her name and a man who found out a person's real worth ain't measured in gold or fancy clothes, but in the grit it takes to rise from the ashes. Y'all stick with me to the end and tell me in the comments of what town you're watching from. I'm mighty curious to see just how far this tale travels. Now, that afternoon's sun was hanging low over Montana territory back in the fall of 1883, stretching long shadows across the train platform there in Iron Creek. It was the kind of light that made a place look pretty and lonesome all at once. Golden but with a chill in the air, full of promise but feeling empty. Caleb Rohr stood there with his hands jammed deep in his coat pockets. His weathered face gave nothing away as he watched that big black engine crawl on into the station. You could hear the metal groaning, and steam was just a-billowing like the breath of some old beast. He sure as heck didn't want to be there. In his 34 years, Caleb had learned that wanting things just led to heartache. He'd wanted his folks to make it through that winter fever, but they didn't. He'd wanted his little brother, Thomas, to quit the drinking, but he couldn't. And he'd wanted to keep the ranch running right after Thomas passed on, leaving behind a quiet little 8-year-old boy. And now here he was, waiting for a complete stranger to walk right into his messed up life because he just couldn't handle it all on his own no more. A mail-order bride. The words left a bad taste in his mouth. The train hissed to a stop and folks started getting off. Caleb watched them close, a merchant in a fine suit, 2 miners still caked in dust, and an old couple helping each other down the steps. And then he saw her. She came out of that third-class car like a ghost taking shape. Her dress, if you could even call it that, was barely more than patched-up rags held together by sheer will and a prayer. The hem was all tore up and muddy, and the sleeves were frayed at the ends. Her boots were split wide open, tied together with what looked like string, and that thin shawl round her shoulders had more holes than fabric. But it wasn't her clothes that made Caleb's breath catch in his chest. It was her eyes. Even from 20 feet off, under the shadow of that worn-out bonnet, he could see them. They were dark and deep, and you could tell they hadn't been broken. She walked with the quiet pride of someone who'd lost everything but refused to lose herself. Her back was straight as an arrow, even though she was tired clear to the bone, and her chin was held high despite the gossip that started right up amongst the townsfolk on that platform. "Well, that's her," old Mrs. Henderson whispered to her daughter, loud enough for the whole county to hear. "That's the woman Caleb Rohr sent for. Good heavens, she looks like something the cat dragged in." "Mother, hush now," her daughter hissed back, but it was too late. Caleb saw the moment Evelyn heard him. He saw that little flinch, the way her eyes got tight, and how her hands gripped the handle of her one beat-up bag just a little bit tighter, but she kept on walking and she didn't look away. She came right up to him, and when she got there, she set down her bag and looked him square in the eye. "You must be Mr. Rohr," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it was steady as a rock, with a hint of an accent from back east. "Just call me Caleb," he said, taking off his hat. She was younger than he figured, maybe 25, but her face held a deep weariness. It was the kind that came from hard living, not years. "Hope the journey treated you right, Miss Ward." "It was adequate," she replied simply. "Thank you." He almost scoffed. Adequate, as if a 3-day train ride from who knows where was just another Tuesday, as if standing there in rags was just a small bother. "Is that all you brought?" he asked, pointing to her small bag. "Yes." Just that one word. Caleb picked it up. It was light as a feather. "Well, come on then," he said, motioning to his wagon. "The ranch is an hour out of town. We'd best get a move on." Walking through the crowd, Caleb felt all eyes on them. He knew what they were all thinking. Proud Caleb Rohr, who'd hardly spoken to a soul, was hiring a woman in rags to raise his nephew. This would be the talk of Iron Creek for weeks. Let him talk. He helped Evelyn onto the wagon. Her hand was ice cold through her thin glove. He climbed up beside her and gave a click to the horses, and they left the whispers behind. They rode in silence for the first few miles, down a road winding through sparse grassland. They passed old fences and claimed stakes, with mountains rising purple against the sky. Caleb kept his eyes on the road, but he was plenty aware of the woman sitting beside him. She sat straight as a board despite the bumpy ride, just drinking in the big country with her watchful eyes. At last, she broke the silence. "Your letter said you needed help with your nephew. How old is the boy?" "Ben's 8, turns 9 in December." "And his parents?" Caleb's jaw clenched. "His mother died when he was born. His daddy, my brother Thomas, passed 6 months ago. A riding accident." He paused. Might as well be honest. "Fact is, he'd been drinking. Drank heavy after his wife died. The whole ranch went to ruin while he was busy drowning his sorrows in a bottle. When he finally fell off that horse for good, he left me a broken down ranch and a boy who hasn't said more than 10 words since the funeral." Caleb had never said it so bluntly before, but something about this quiet woman, sitting proud in her worn-out clothes, made him speak the truth. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry for y'all's loss, especially for Ben." "The boy needs a woman around," Caleb said. "Someone who can give him time that I ain't got. I'm too busy trying to hold this place together. I can cook and I can mend, but I can't give him a real home. Not the kind a boy needs. I need someone who can." "I understand," she said. The letter laid out the terms. Caleb nodded, feeling a bit awkward. "You'd help with Ben in the house. In return, you'd get room and board. I can pay a small wage when I'm able. This ain't about romance, Miss Ward. I just need a helping hand." "I understand," she replied. "I'm not looking for romance either, Mr. Rohr. I'm looking for a roof overhead, a place where I can rest easy. We both need something, and that seems like a fair trade." He glanced at her, then took a real hard look. In the fading light, he saw the lines of worry. Her hollow cheeks spoke of missed meals, and her clothes just hung on her small frame. But he also saw the set of her shoulders, the straightness of her gaze, and a quiet strength. It was in her very being. "What happened to you?" he asked before he could rightly stop himself. Then he said, "I'm sorry, that ain't my place to ask." "It's all right," she said, looking toward the mountains. Her whole expression changed then, becoming hard as iron and fragile as glass all at once. "I was married 3 years. My husband in Philadelphia was a good, kind man. We had a simple life. Then the yellow fever came through. It took him from me in just 4 days. After he was gone, I learned he'd been borrowing money for his mother's doctor bills, for debts his father left behind. He never told me, just trying to spare me the worry. The creditors came and took everything, the house, the furniture, even my wedding dress. I was left with just the clothes on my back in a single bag. My sister's husband said I was just another mouth to feed, so I left and took work where I could find it. For a time, I was in a factory, but the foreman there, her hands tightened in her lap. He wanted more from the women than just their work. When I told him no, he sent me packing. I found other G's washing and cleaning, but it was barely enough. Just enough to survive. Then I saw an advertisement for a mail-order bride in an old newspaper. I'd never have imagined it for myself. But she met his eyes, and they were steady. Desperation makes a person. Caleb just nodded. He surely understood desperation. He lived with it every single day, trying to hold this ranch together and raise a boy when he could hardly hold himself together. "I won't expect more than our deal," he said. "You help with Ben in the house, and you have a place here. That's the arrangement. You have my word on it." "Thank you," she whispered back. He cleared his throat after a spell. "Fair warning," he said. "The ranch is in a real sorry state. Thomas let the place go bad, and I've been trying to fix it between the cattle and Ben. The house needs work. The barn needs work. Heck, the whole place needs work. It's not much." "Mr. Rohr," she said with just a hint of dry humor, "I came here with rags on my back and a bag that weighs less than a newborn calf. My expectations are mighty modest, and despite the weight of it all, the strangeness of it all, the grief that sat heavy in his chest." Caleb nearly smiled. "Fair enough," he said. As they came over the last ridge, The ranch spread out below. Even in the fading light, he saw it for what it was. A house with a sagging porch and missing shingles, a barn with a busted roof, and fences that needed mending in a dozen places. The whole place looked worn out and neglected. It was barely holding on. He felt Evelyn get real still next to him. "That's it," he said plainly. "That's the ranch." She was so quiet he figured she'd ask him to turn around and take her back to town. He wouldn't have held it against her. But when she spoke, her voice wasn't upset. It was thoughtful. "It has good bones," she said. "The house is solid, even if it needs work. The barn can be fixed, and the land is good. It's not broken, Mr. Roar. It's just tired." Hearing that eased something deep inside him. "You see all that, do you?" he asked. "I do." She looked him square in the eye. "I know what it's like to be tired, but not broken. I know it when I see it." They rode down into the growing darkness. As they got near the house, the door opened. A small boy, Ben, stood on the porch, thin and watchful. He had the cautious eyes of a child who knew good things don't always last. Caleb stopped the wagon and hopped down, then went to help Evelyn. She grabbed her bag, and they walked up to the porch. "Ben," Caleb said, "this is Miss Evelyn Ward. She's here to help us." "Miss Ward, this is my nephew, Ben." Evelyn looked at the mom, and Caleb saw her face soften. It was like she recognized something in his guarded expression, something she knew well. She didn't talk down to him or put on a fake, cheerful voice. Instead, she just gave him a simple nod, like he was a grown man. "Hello, Ben," she said quietly. "It's a pleasure to meet you." Ben looked her over for a long moment. Then, in a near whisper, he said, "You look sad." Caleb started to correct the boy, but Evelyn put up a hand. "I am sad," she told Ben, her voice honest. "I've had some hard times, but I'm hoping it'll get better here." "Do you think it might?" Ben thought about it seriously, then he shrugged. "Maybe. It's quiet here. Uncle Caleb says quiet is good for thinking." "Your uncle is a wise man," Evelyn said, with the hint of a smile for Caleb. "I think I'm going to like it here." Caleb led them in, lighting lamps as he went. The house was clean but mighty bare. The main room served as kitchen and living space. A big stone fireplace took up one wall. A rough-cut table with 4 chairs sat in the middle. Everything was simple and well-worn. Stairs went up to 3 small bedrooms. The second floor. "Right this way," Caleb said, picking up her bag. "Your room ain't much, but it's got a good bed and gets the morning sun. Me and Ben are in the other 2 rooms up here. The washroom is out back, and we've got a water pump in the kitchen." He led her up the stairs to the smallest room. It had a simple bed, a little dresser with a cracked mirror, and a chair. The floorboards were clean, but the walls were bare. Evelyn just stood in the doorway. Caleb waited, holding his breath. "It's perfect," she finally said with a soft smile. "It's half empty and could use some paint," Caleb admitted. "But it's mine," she replied simply. "That's what makes it perfect." She put her bag on the bed. In the lamplight, he saw just how tired she truly was. She held herself up like it took every bit of her strength. "I'll let you get settled," he said gently. "Come on down when you're ready. I'll warm up some stew for supper." "Mr. Roar," she called out, stopping him. "Thank you for taking a chance on me." Caleb looked at her, so worn out in that plain room. He felt something stir in his chest. "You didn't arrive with nothing, Miss Ward," he said quietly. "You arrived with yourself. That's a whole lot." He left before she could say more. Downstairs, Ben was at the table, drawing with a pencil stub. The boy looked up. "Is she staying for good?" he asked. "That's the plan," Caleb said, stirring the stew. "She's going to help out around the place, help with the house, and help look after you. You think you can be good for her?" Ben nodded. "She looks like she needs help too." Well, a child sees things plain, Caleb thought. The boy was right. Evelyn Ward looked like she'd been through a storm and was the only thing left standing. His ranch needed fixing and his nephew needed a woman's touch, but she needed a safe harbor. "Maybe we can all help each other out," Caleb said softly. When Evelyn came down 20 minutes later, she'd washed her face. Her dark hair was pulled back neat. She still wore that same tattered dress, of course. It was likely all she owned in the world. Caleb made a note in his head. Tomorrow he'd give her some money to buy fabric in town. Surely she knew how to sew, and could make herself something better to wear. The three of them ate their supper in a quiet peace. The stew was simple fare, just beef and potatoes. Evelyn ate slow, like someone who knew what it was to be hungry. Ben watched her, full of curiosity, and Caleb found himself watching them both, wondering what he'd just done. After supper, Evelyn insisted on washing the dishes, tired as she was. Caleb didn't argue. He was starting to understand her pride. It was the kind you hold on to when you've got nothing else left. "All right, Ben," he said. "It's about that time." The boy nodded, then walked right over to Evelyn at the wash basin. "Good night, Miss Ward," he said, real quiet-like. She dried her hands, and the smile she gave him was the first real one Caleb had seen on her face. It was soft and a little sad. "Good night, Ben," she replied. "Sleep tight." Once the boy was gone, Caleb and Evelyn stood in the quiet kitchen, with a whole mess of words hanging unspoken between them. "I'm up before the sun," Caleb finally said, "and got cattle and fences to see to." "Don't you worry about that. You sleep in. Ben's up around 6 and will need his breakfast. After that, the day's your own. The house needs work, but don't you go rushing it." "I'm used to early mornings," Evelyn said. "I'll be up with you." "You don't have to." "Mr. Roar," she said, and her voice, though soft, had a spine of steel. "I came to work and earn my keep. I won't do that by laying about. I'll be up with you, ready to do what needs doing. That was our deal." Caleb just looked at her. She showed up in rags but stood there now, looking like a general. "All right then," he said, "but if you need rest, you take it. You hear?" "I understand," she replied, though they both knew she wouldn't be resting anytime soon. Caleb nodded and headed for the stairs. "Good night then, Miss Ward." "Good night, Mr. Roar," she said, "and thank you again." He paused on the stairs. "No need for thanks. It's a fair trade." "Maybe so," she said softly. "But some fair trades are still worth being grateful for." Caleb laid awake for a good long while that night, listening to the familiar ranch sounds. The wind, the cattle, the old house groaning. But tonight there was something new. The soft sound of a woman's footsteps in the room next to Ben's. He'd let a complete stranger into his house, right into his and his nephew's world. A woman who showed up looking half-starved, bone-tired and wearing rags. Her whole life tucked into one little bag. But when he shut his eyes, he didn't see the rags. He saw her eyes, dark, deep, and not a bit of quit in them. Maybe this wasn't a mistake, he thought. Maybe all these broken pieces, this ranch, this woman, him, and the boy, could somehow help put each sphere back together, or maybe that was just wishful thinking. Time would tell. The moon hung high over Montana, washing the tired old ranch in silver light. It was a place just barely surviving, and inside 3 souls were trying to do the same, each one holding on to the hope that tomorrow might be a little bit better than today. And in her small room, Evelyn lay in a real bed for the first time in months, feeling something new. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it felt like a chance. And after all she'd lost, a chance was everything. After everything she'd been through, just having a chance felt like a miracle. The wind outside whispered of a new season, a new start. And inside, 3 lonely souls hoped they'd finally found a place to rest. Caleb woke to the smell of coffee, and for a second, he was all turned around. He was the one who made the coffee, every morning for 6 long months. Ever since Thomas passed, leaving him alone with Ben and this whole ranch. That routine was carved into his bones. Wake up, make coffee. But this morning, somebody beat him to it. He dressed in a hurry. When he got downstairs, he found Evelyn Ward already in the kitchen. The stove was lit, and the coffee pot was bubbling away something cheerful. She stood there in that same ragged dress, slicing bread with one of his knives. She looked up, and he saw the dark shadows under her eyes. She hadn't slept a wink. "Good morning," she said softly. "I hope you don't mind. I got started." "It ain't even 5 o'clock, Caleb said, reaching for the coffee. "You didn't need to be up." "And I told you I would," she replied simply, moving toward the pantry. "I found some eggs and bacon. Is that all right for y'all?" Caleb poured a cup. It was strong and hot, just right. He watched her. She moved through his kitchen with a quiet grace. "Evelyn," he finally said. She paused, startled to hear her first name spoken out loud. You can't keep wearing that old dress. After breakfast, you're going to town. I'm giving you money for fabric and thread. Make yourself some proper clothes. Before she could argue, he added, it ain't charity. It's just practical sense. A woman needs clothes that'll hold up. He could see her pride fighting with the desperation. At last, she nodded. Thank you. I'll pay you back from my salary. We'll worry on that later, Caleb interrupted. For now, just get what you need. A little bit later, Ben stumbled down the stairs. His hair was sticking up every which way, his eyes still full of sleep. He stopped dead when he saw Evelyn, like he'd forgotten she was staying. Morning, Sharon, he mumbled. Good morning, Ben, Evelyn said, her voice warm and gentle. I'm making eggs. How do you like yours? The boy just shrugged. Don't matter. It matters how you like 'em, Caleb, Evelyn told him. Some like 'em soft, some fried. What about you, Ben? A small question, but Caleb saw it meant the world to the boy. No one had asked what he wanted in a long, long time. His pa was lost to grief, and Caleb was just keeping them alive. Scrambled, Ben whispered, barely making a sound. Soft. Soft scrambled it is, she said with a gentle smile. They ate as the morning sun filled the kitchen with light. She served them big helpings, but took almost nothing for herself. He pushed more eggs onto her plate, and she started to object. You need to eat, he said flatly. You're thin as a fence post. Can't have you fainting while you're looking after my nephew. Her eyes flashed with fire. She didn't like being told what to do. He understood her pride, but he wasn't about to let her starve for it. Please, he said, softening his voice just a bit. And she ate. After breakfast, he pressed some money into her hand. Go to town. Get supplies. Ben's coming with me. We're fixing the north pasture fence. I can stay and help Miss Ward, Ben said quickly, looking right at her. It's a two-man job, Caleb said gently, understanding the boy's fear. Ben was just plain scared she'd up and disappear like everyone else. She'll be right here when we get back. Son, I promise you that. Evelyn knelt down to his level. I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere. Just a quick trip to town and I'll come right back. All right? The boy nodded, and the pure hope on his face was a punch to the gut. They left her hitching up the wagon and headed out north. It was a clear, crisp Montana autumn morning. They worked in a comfortable silence under that big, wide sky, replacing old posts, stringing new wire. Ben was a steady hand. The little fella had grown up too fast, learning the silence of broken men. So, Caleb finally asked him, you like her? You like Miss Ward? Ben asked, not looking up from some wire. Caleb stopped his hammer mid-swing. Don't know her well enough to say, Caleb said. She seems capable and honest. That's enough for now. She's sad, Ben said softly. Real sad, like Pa was. He trailed off. He didn't have to finish. Caleb put down his hammer and looked hard at his nephew. The boy had lost his mama, then his daddy, and was now stuck with an uncle barely keeping it together. Yeah, Caleb said quietly. She's sad, all right. She's seen hard times, lost folks she loved, but sad ain't the same as broken. Your pa, he was drowning in his grief, but Miss Ward, she's sad, but she's still standing. She gonna stay? Ben asked, his voice real small. The hope in it nearly cracked Caleb's heart. I don't know, son, he said honestly, but I reckon she wants to. She needs a place to wind in just as much as we need the help. Maybe if we're all patient, she'll stick around. Ben nodded and got back to work. Caleb saw the tension leave his little shoulders, and that was something. Down in town, Evelyn Ward was in the general store picking out supplies like a general planning a war. She had a list in her head, fabric for a couple of dresses, one for work, one for Sunday, thread buttons, underthings, and a good pair of boots without any holes. A warm shawl, too. The owner, a round fella named Mr. Jameson, watched her with a powerful curiosity. You're the new woman staying out at the Roar place, he stated, more than asked. I am, Evelyn said, keeping her eyes on a bolt of blue cotton. Must be a big change from back east to a ranch in the middle of nowhere. It is, she agreed, but it's a welcome one. She could feel him judging her, wondering what kind of woman shows up in rags to keep house for a man like Caleb Roar. She knew what he was thinking. The gossip was probably all over town by now, thanks to Mrs. Henderson. Let 'em talk. She'd face down worse than whispers. She picked her practical things, nothing fancy, just durable. As Mr. Jameson was adding it all up, the bell on the door jingled. In walked two women Evelyn recognized from the train platform. It was Mrs. Henderson and her daughter. Well now, Mrs. Henderson said, her voice loud enough for all to hear, if it isn't Caleb Roar's new help. The word was meant to sting. Evelyn kept her cool. Good morning, she said politely, looking right past her. Settling in all right, are you? Mrs. Henderson pushed, moving closer. Well enough, thank you. Must be a big change living out there with just Mr. Roar and that poor child. Awfully isolated. Almost intimate. Evelyn turned to face her, seeing Mrs. Henderson's eyes go wide at the look on her face. Mr. Roar has been a perfect gentleman, Evelyn said, her voice soft but strong as steel. He needed help with his nephew, and I needed a well and a roof over my head. It's a simple arrangement, and I'd thank you to not imply otherwise. Oh, I'm not suggesting a thing, Mrs. Henderson claimed, though her red face told another story. I'm just saying that folks will talk, a single woman living with a single man. Then folks ought to find better things to do with their time, Evelyn cut in. Now, if you'll excuse me. She paid Mr. Jameson, gathered her things, and walked out of that store with her head held high, even though her hands were trembling, and her heart was pounding. She'd faced worse than town gossip back in Philadelphia. She'd dealt with men who tried to take advantage when she was down on her luck. She could handle Mrs. Henderson's meddling, but it still stung. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Evelyn just watched the wide open country, the way the wind made the grass dance. She'd felt trapped for so long by poverty and circumstance, stuck inside gray city walls. But out here, there were no walls, just endless space and sky. It felt like she could finally take a real breath. When she got back to the ranch, Caleb and Ben were still out. She unhitched the wagon and stabled the horses, a skill from another life, and brought her packages in. Then she stood in the main room and truly looked at the place. Caleb was right, it needed a woman's touch. The floors were swept but dull, the windows grimy. The furniture was sturdy but tired, and the walls were bare. But just like she'd told him, the place had good bones. The structure was solid and the layout was sensible. It just needed some care. So Evelyn rolled up her sleeves and got right to it. Hours later, when a tired and hungry Caleb and Ben came home, the house was transformed. She'd scrubbed the floors till they shined, washed the windows till they sparkled, and had the old curtains soaking. She dusted and swept and organized everything. The main room just glowed in the afternoon light, and the whole place smelled of fresh baked bread. Caleb and Ben just stopped dead in the doorway and stared. I know it's not much, Evelyn said, wiping her hands on an apron she'd made from a flour sack. But it's a start. It's incredible, Caleb cut in, his voice rough. I told you not to overdo it. I don't need rest, she said. I need to work, to feel useful. Please, Mr. Roar, don't ask me to be idle. I just can't. He looked at her then, really looked, and saw the truth of her. He saw her true grit then, a woman with a spine of steel and a gentle heart. She'd shown up with nothing but was already bringing a long-lost light into his home. All right, he finally said, but you will take time tomorrow to sew those dresses. That's final. A small smile touched her lips. Tomorrow, she agreed as they sat down for lunch. Evelyn listened intently as Ben chattered about working the fence line and seeing a new calf. He was bursting with pride that Uncle Caleb let him hammer in 3 posts all by himself. Caleb hadn't seen the boy so full of life in months, his eyes shining as he spoke. And Evelyn treated the 8-year-old's stories like they were the most important news in the world. After lunch, the boy, worn out from his big morning, went upstairs to rest. Caleb found himself alone with Evelyn as she washed the dishes, her hands already showing the work. I need to ask you something, he said, getting straight to it. She turned, a hint of weariness on her face. Can you read? The question surprised her. Yes, I can read, write, and do arithmetic. My father made sure of it. He said being ignorant was the worst kind of poor. Good, Caleb said, relieved, because Ben needs some schooling, and I'm not the man to teach him. My learning is all for the ranch. If you could teach him his letters and numbers, I'd be mighty grateful. I'll pay extra for it. But Evelyn just shook her head. You don't need to do that. Teaching Ben is part of caring for him. I'd be happy to. Still, Caleb insisted, a proper education is worth paying for. Their eyes met across the kitchen, and Caleb felt something change between them. This was becoming more than just a deal for room and board. There's one more thing, he said, his chest feeling a little tight. Folks in town are bound to gossip about you being here. They'll make up stories. I want you to know I won't stand for anyone speaking badly of you. You have my protection. No one will question your honor while you're here. He saw her eyes glisten with tears before she turned away. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. That means more than you can imagine. The promise hung in the air between them, unspoken but deeply felt. Caleb realized they were building something real. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was more like a family, piecing itself together from broken parts. That evening after supper, Evelyn finally sat by the fire with her new fabric. Caleb had found one of his mother's old pattern books for her in a dusty trunk. She studied it, making careful measurements, while Ben sat quietly at the table, with a slate, practicing his letters by the lamp. Now and then he'd peek up at Evelyn, just to make sure she was still there. Caleb sat in his pa's old chair, pretending to read a newspaper that was weeks old, but he was really just watching the two of them. And he felt a quiet settle over him, something he hadn't felt since way before Thomas passed. It was a fragile kind of peace, but it was there all the same. Tell me about your family, Evelyn said, her voice soft. About your folks and Thomas and this ranch? Caleb set the paper aside. It was the first real question she'd ever asked him, the first time she tried to see the man instead of just the boss. My folks homesteaded this land 30 years ago, he began. They came from Missouri with nothing but a wagon and more grit than sense. They built this house, cleared this land. It was hard country, but they made it work. My father was a tough man, but he was fair. And my mother, she was the strongest woman I ever knew. Could shoot straight, ride hard, and still bake the best apple pie this side of the mountains. Thomas and me, we grew up right here. He was younger by 4 years, always had a softer heart than me. He fell hard for a teacher's daughter from town, a girl named Sarah. They married young, and when Ben came along, Thomas figured he had the whole world. But he lost Sarah right after the birth, and Thomas, well, he just never came back from it. He tried for Ben's sake. But the grief was a storm he couldn't get out of. He ended up drowning his sorrows in a bottle. And your parents? Evelyn asked gently. A winter fever took them both 5 years back in the same week. I got the ranch, and Thomas, he just got his grief. I was managing a neighboring property back then. I wasn't here enough to see how bad it had gotten. By the time I came home for good, Thomas was already too far gone, and this place was falling to pieces. He stopped, his jaw set hard. I failed him, he said, the words heavy with old guilt. I was just so angry at him, angry that he chose the whiskey over his own son. That anger kept me away too long. You didn't fail him, Evelyn said, her voice firm. He made his own choices, Caleb. You can't save a man who doesn't want to be saved. Trust me, I know. I watched my husband's kin pull him under with their troubles, and I couldn't do a blessed thing about it. Sometimes folks are drowning, and they just won't take the rope you throw them. Caleb looked at her, and he saw it in her eyes. He saw she understood the weight of it, the heavy burden of wondering if you could have done more. How'd you survive it, he asked her. After losing everything, how did you keep on going? She was quiet for a long moment. I didn't have much of a choice, she finally said. Giving up meant laying down to die, so I just put one foot in front of the other, day after day. I stopped worrying about tomorrow and just fought to get through today. Today. And I just kept getting through each day, still standing. Not whole, but surviving. And now, Caleb asked her. In the firelight, her eyes looked as deep as a well. Now I'm trying to live, not just survive, she said, her voice low, trying to find a real reason to stay. The moment hung between them, heavy with things they couldn't yet say. Ben's voice cut right through the quiet. Miss Ward, did I make this R right? Evelyn went to his slate right away, and just like that, the moment was gone. But it left something behind, a quiet understanding between the two of them. They were both broken souls, hoping this ranch might just be the place to mend. After that, The days fell into a steady, comforting rhythm. Caleb was up before dawn for the ranch, and Evelyn rose with him to cook. She spent her days turning the house back into a home, bringing light to the dark corners. Afternoons were for Ben's lessons, her hand gently guiding his on the slate. And every evening, all three of them came together for supper and quiet talk. They were building something that felt an awful lot like a family. She sewed herself two dresses, a sturdy blue one for work and a soft brown one for Sunday. Wearing something decent without a single hole made her stand a little taller. She mended Caleb's shirts and Ben's torn pants, always keeping busy. She baked bread and made stews, stretching their supplies like a miracle worker. She even planted flower bulbs for spring and tamed the wild bushes by the house. And slowly but surely, the shadows under her eyes began to fade away. Eating proper meals, she wasn't so frail, and she moved with a newfound confidence. Ben just blossomed under her care like a flower seeing the sun. He started talking more, sometimes even laughing, showing her his drawings. The nightmares that used to plague him at night finally faded away. And Caleb found himself watching Evelyn more than was probably proper. He'd watch the way she smiled at Ben, or how she'd stare out at the mountains. At first, he figured it was just gratitude for her help with the boy and the house. But late at night, he'd lay there and admit to himself it was more than that. He was starting to care for her, not as his hired help, but as a person. This fierce, sad, strong woman who came with nothing and was giving them everything. It just plain terrified him. About 3 weeks after Evelyn got there, Caleb found her on a rickety ladder, fixing a shutter that had popped loose. She was stretched way up on her tiptoes, and that ladder was wobbling something awful. "Evelyn!" he hollered, crossing the yard in a hurry. "You get down from there right now!" She jumped at his voice. The ladder swayed something fierce, and his heart stopped. But she found her footing, climbed down, and turned to face him with pure fire in her eyes. "I had it handled," she said. "You were fixing to break your neck," he shot back. "If you need a hand with something, you ask me. You don't go risking yourself on some wobbly ladder." "You can't do it all, Caleb. You're already working sunup to sundown just to keep this place afloat. I can handle a simple repair." It was the first time she'd said his name, just like that. And that, mixed with the scare she gave him, just made his temper rise. "You think I brought you out here to get yourself hurt?" he demanded. "To watch somebody else get hurt on my land because I wasn't looking out? I think you can't protect the whole world," she said, her voice getting just as loud as his. "You're carrying enough already. I'm not fragile, Caleb. I don't break that easy." "You could have fallen," he said, his voice cracking on the words. "You could have been hurt bad, and it would have been all my fault." "It would not have been your fault," Evelyn said, cutting him off. "Just like Thomas's death wasn't your fault. None of it was. You can't stop every bad thing from happening. Sometimes they just do, and all you can do is live through it." They stood there in the yard, breathing hard, and Caleb knew they weren't fighting about no ladder. They were fighting about guilt and carrying weight that wasn't theirs to carry. "I'm sorry," he said finally. I can't lose anyone else. Not Ben, not—" He couldn't bring himself to finish. "Not me," Evelyn said softly. "I know, but you gotta let me help, Caleb. You gotta let me be strong. The only way I know how to get by is to keep busy, to be useful. If you wrap me in cotton and treat me like I'll break, I surely will. You understand?" He just looked at her, this woman who'd been through so much but was still standing, and he gave a slow nod. "I understand," he said, "but you promise me you'll be careful and you'll ask for help." "I promise," she said, "if you'll promise me the same." They shook on it, a firm grip in the afternoon sun, and when they let go, something had changed for the better. They had fought their way through it and said what needed saying. They were finally learning how to be partners in this whole thing. That night, after Ben was asleep, Caleb found Evelyn on the porch, wearing her new shawl, just looking up at the stars. "It's getting chilly," he said, joining her. "But it's beautiful," she said. "I've never seen so many stars. Back in Philadelphia, all the city lights just washed them out." "Thank you," Caleb said after a long, quiet moment, "for all of it." "You're welcome," Evelyn replied, "and thank you for giving me a place to land, for seeing past the desperation and given me a chance. I didn't see past it, Caleb said honestly. I saw it clear, but I saw you more. She turned to him and the starlight made her face look soft and open. I was so scared when I got off that train, she confessed. Scared you'd send me back. But you let me stay. You let me matter. You do matter, Caleb said, his voice thick with feeling. More than you know. They just stood there, two broken people finding comfort in the night. And for the first time in a long time, Caleb let himself feel a little hope. He thought maybe, just maybe, they were all going to be all right. The first snow came early that year, dust in the mountains in mid-October. Evelyn came downstairs to find Caleb had a fire roaring already. He was trying to make coffee, so she gently said, "Let me get that." They had found an easy rhythm with each other in the house. "Winter comes on fast here," Caleb said, warming his hands on the mug. "I've got to finish the barn roof before the real heavy snow gets here. We'll need to lay in a lot more firewood, too." "I can help with the wood," Evelyn offered. "I'm stronger than I look." He studied her face and saw it was true. Her cheeks weren't hollow anymore. Good food and steady work had brought life back to her. "I know you are," he said, "but I'd rather you get the house sealed up for winter. Besides, somebody's got to keep Ben up with his lessons." Ben had turned into her best student, always eager to learn. They worked on his reading and arithmetic at the kitchen table every afternoon. Evelyn was amazed at how hungry the boy was for stories and knowledge. "He's a bright boy," she told Caleb one evening. "Smart enough for a university someday." The look of pure pride on Caleb's face was worth everything. Wondering like it never crossed his mind that quiet boy could have a life off this ranch. Fixing breakfast in the dark, Evelyn found herself thinking about the future. She'd spent so long just getting by, the very idea felt like a dangerous dream. "Caleb," she said, her voice soft as she cracked eggs into the skillet, "what happens when winter finally breaks?" He was quiet for a spell. "What are you getting at?" "This arrangement. You hired me on for Ben in the house. They're both doing fine now. When the ranch work picks up, will you still be needing me?" She stared hard at the eggs, afraid to look at him. She feared what his answer might be. In just a few weeks, this place had become more than a job. It had become a real home. Ben felt like her own son. And Caleb, he'd become something else. Something that made her heart flutter and kept her awake at night. She lay there wondering if he felt even a little bit of what she was feeling. "Evelyn," Caleb's voice was gravelly, "look at me." She turned slow, and he was watching her with a look so strong, it took her breath clean away. "Are you wanting to leave?" he asked. "No," she whispered, "but I don't aim to." "Overstay my welcome. I won't be a burden." "I need you," he cut in, the words hanging there. "Ben needs you. This house needs you. I ain't asking you to go. I'm asking you to stay. Not just through spring, not just till the work is done. I'm asking you to stay for good." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "As my housekeeper. Whatever you want. As Ben's teacher. As the heart of this home." He stumbled on the words, then pushed on. "As my wife, if you'd have me. Not because you have to, but because I'm plain tired of pretending this is just a job. When I see you with Ben, when I come home to the smell of your bread, when I hear you singing, I feel something I reckon died with Thomas. I feel hope, like maybe I could be happy again." Evelyn's hands were shaking. "Caleb, I have nothing to bring to a marriage. No money, no family. You have yourself," he said, just like he did that first night. "And that's everything." "Folks in town already talk," she said. "Mrs. Henderson whispers about us. If we wed, they'll say I trapped you, that I only came here to be Mrs. Rourke." "Let 'em talk," Caleb said fiercely. "I don't give a damn what that woman thinks. I care what happens in this house. With this family, I care about you, Evelyn, more than I thought I could ever care for anyone again." She looked at him, truly looked, and saw the truth there on his weathered face. This wasn't pity. This was real. This broken man was offering her his heart, asking her to take the same chance he was. "I care about you too," she admitted, her voice just a whisper. "I didn't want to, I never meant to. I told myself this was just a job, just how I had to survive. But somewhere between teaching Ben his letters and mending your shirts and learning just how you take your coffee, I started to care. I started to have hope. And Lord, it terrifies me because I have lost every single person I have ever loved. And I do not know if my heart could survive losing you too. Caleb crossed that kitchen in two big strides and took her hands right in his. His palms were rough and warm, calloused from all those years of ranch work, and his grip was steady and sure. I cannot promise we will not face hard times, he said. I cannot promise the ranch will not fail, or that the winters will not be brutal, or that life will not send more grief our way. But I can promise you they will be here. I will stand right beside you through whatever comes. I will not let you face things all alone. Tears just slipped right down Evelyn's cheeks, and she did not even bother to wipe them away. Yes, she said, yes, I will marry you. Not because I need a roof over my head or for safety, but because I want to build a life with you. I want to be Ben's mother and your wife and a real part of this family. He pulled her in close, wrapped his arms around her, and she buried her face in his chest and just breathed in the good scent of him. It was wood smoke and leather and something that was just purely Caleb. They stood together in the kitchen as the sun started to come up, two people who had been broken, finding a way to be whole again in each other's arms. The sound of little feet on the stairs made them pull apart. Ben showed up in the doorway, his hair all messed up from sleep, looking back and forth between them with wide eyes. What is happening? He asked. Caleb and Evelyn shared a quick glance, and then Caleb knelt so he was right there on the boy's level. Ben, he said gently, how would you feel about Miss Ward staying here for good? About her becoming a part of our family? The boy's face just lit up like the sunrise. Really? She is not leaving? Not if she does not want to, Caleb said. Ben turned to Evelyn with hope and joy all over his face. You are staying forever? Forever, Evelyn confirmed, and she found herself laughing through her tears as Ben launched himself right at her, wrapping his skinny arms around her waist in a powerful hug. I told Uncle Caleb you would stay, Ben said, his voice muffled against her dress. I told him you belonged here. You were exactly right, Evelyn said, running her fingers through his soft hair. I do belong here, with the both of you. They decided on a simple wedding, just the three of them, with a traveling preacher who came through Iron Creek about once a month. Caleb wanted to marry her right then and there, but Evelyn insisted they wait until Reverend Walsh's next visit in 2 weeks. She said she wanted time to make herself a proper dress and to prepare a nice wedding meal. The real truth was she needed time to believe it was all real, to let herself soak in the goodness of what was happening. She was going to be a wife again and a mother in every way that counted. She was going to have a family and a home and a future that was about more than just getting by. The days before the wedding were just filled with a quiet joy and a happy, nervous feeling. Evelyn sewed her own dress from the softest fabric she could find in town, a deep green wool that really brought out the color of her eyes. It was simple but mighty pretty, with a fitted top and long sleeves, modest enough for a wedding on the ranch, but beautiful enough to make her feel like a true bride. Ben appointed himself the head of wedding plans, asking all sorts of questions about flowers and food, and if there was going to be cake. His excitement was catching. And Evelyn found herself laughing more in those 2 weeks than she had in years. Caleb threw himself into fixing that barn roof and chopping enough wood for 3 winters. He worked like a man trying to prove his worth, and Evelyn would watch him from the kitchen. Seeing him swing that axe gave her a flutter in her stomach, part nerves and part excitement. They hadn't talked about the intimate parts of being married, both too shy to bring it up. But Evelyn had been married before. She knew what was coming on their wedding night. The thought filled her with a feeling she couldn't quite name, a mix of fear and longing. One afternoon, while she was hanging laundry, a wagon came rolling up the trail. A tall, broad-shouldered woman with silver in her hair and sharp blue eyes climbed down. She wore men's trousers and moved like she knew exactly where she was going. You must be Evelyn Ward, she said, sticking out a weathered hand. I'm Margaret Sullivan. My ranch is about 3 miles east of y'all. Heard Caleb finally got some good help. Just call me Margaret, Ishti said. Mrs. Sullivan was my mother-in-law, and I wasn't too fond of her. Her eyes were assessing but kind. I also heard you're marrying him next week. Is that a fact? It is, Evelyn said, lifting her chin, ready for whatever came next. But Margaret just laughed. It was a big, booming sound. Well, it's about time somebody civilized that fella. He's been like a wounded bear since his brother passed. Are you good to him? I try to be, Evelyn said. He's been nothing but kind and honorable. Margaret nodded, satisfied. Good, 'cause if he wasn't, you'd come tell me, and I'd ride over here to set him straight. Out here, women have to look out for one another. You remember that? If you ever need anything or just someone to talk to, you come find me. You hear? A warm feeling bloomed in Evelyn's chest. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed a woman's friendship. Thank you, she said. That means more to me than you could ever know. I brought you something, Margaret said, pulling a wrapped bundle from her wagon. Evelyn unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a beautiful quilt, hand-stitched with care. It was old, but you could tell it was loved. Each stitch was just perfect. It was my grandmother's, Margaret told her. She brought it here from Kentucky back in 1840. She said it would remind me that women are stronger than any storm. I want you to have it. Oh, Margaret, I can't, Evelyn started. This is a family heirloom. And you're about to be family, Margaret said firmly. Neighbors are family out here. We get through it together. You're not alone, darling. Not anymore. Evelyn clutched that quilt, her eyes getting misty. Thank you, she whispered. Margaret stayed for coffee, telling Evelyn old stories about the wild Montana days. She talked about rough winters, cattle thieves, and husbands who were a bit too sure of themselves. By the time Margaret left, Evelyn felt like she'd made a real friend, an ally in this tough country. That night, Evelyn spread the quilt over her bed, feeling its comfort. She traced the patterns, thinking how each square held a story. Soon, it would be part of her story, warming the home she was building with Caleb. The night before the wedding, Caleb asked her to take a walk with him. They left Ben with Margaret Sullivan, who'd kindly offered to watch the boy for the night. They walked across the ranch land as the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors. I wanted to show you something, Caleb said, leading her up a small hill. From there, you could see the whole place, the fixed-up house, the strong barn, and the fences stretching out. The cattle were grazing peacefully. When my folks got here, this was just grass and a dream, Caleb said. They built every bit of it from the ground up. The house, the barn, their whole life. Then Thomas, his grief nearly tore it all down. I thought it was all just too broken to fix. I figured this place was cursed to fall apart, no matter how hard I worked, he admitted, turning to her. He took both her hands in his. But then you came along, he said, his voice soft. Somehow you helped me put it all back together. Not just the ranch, but the hope that went with it. You made me believe that broken things can be made whole again. You did the same for me, Evelyn answered gently. I was just lost, Caleb. You and Ben, y'all gave me a reason to hope again, not just survive. I need you to know, Caleb said, his voice turning serious. Tomorrow isn't just a deal. It's not 'cause I need a housekeeper or Ben needs a mother, though Lord knows that's true. It's because I love you, Evelyn. I didn't mean to, but I do. I love your strength, your kindness, and how you make this place feel like a home. I love your stubborn streak and the way you hum when you cook. I just love you. I had to tell you that before we stand up there in front of God and the Reverend, he finished. Evelyn's heart soared. She'd hoped he cared, but she never imagined this. I love you too, she said, and the words felt like pure freedom. I love your steady heart and how you care for Ben. Even when you're scared, you'll mess it up. You never complain, and you look at me like I'm something precious. I was so darn scared to love again, especially after losing Edward. But you gave me the courage to treat me so. He then kissed her, a tender and sweet kiss, his lips warm in the cool evening air. It was nothing like the kisses she'd known with Edward. Those were the easy kisses of youth. This one was different, a kiss between two folks who'd been broken and were choosing to be whole again together. They were daring to love, knowing full well what it could cost them. When they finally pulled apart, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. Tomorrow, he said softly. Tomorrow you'll be my wife. Tomorrow, she agreed, and every single day after. They stood on that hill as the stars came out, and Evelyn felt a peace so deep it was almost startling. She had come so far from that lost woman who got off the train in rags. She hadn't just found shelter. She'd found a home. Not just a biome, but a purpose. Not just survival, but real love. Their wedding day dawned clear and cold, the kind of autumn morning that lets you know winter is on its way. Margaret showed up early with Ben, who was buzzing with excitement. She shooed Caleb out of the house so Evelyn could get ready in peace. "Here, let me help you with that," Margaret said, her skilled hands making short work of the buttons on Evelyn's green dress. She had woven some late-season wildflowers into Evelyn's hair, and when Evelyn glanced in the small mirror, she barely recognized the happy, healthy woman looking back. "You're beautiful," Ben whispered, appearing in the doorway. "Uncle Caleb is going to be so surprised." "Well, where is your uncle?" Evelyn asked. "He's in the barn getting all dressed up," Ben said with a big grin. "He keeps fussing with his hair." Margaret told him to quit it or she'd take the shears to it. Evelyn laughed, picturing a nervous Caleb. It was a comfort knowing he had the wedding day jitters too. Reverend Walsh, a kind man in his 60s, arrived at noon. He'd been traveling this circuit for 30 years. The five of them gathered in the main room of the little house. It was small, intimate, and absolutely perfect. Caleb stood by the fireplace in his Sunday best, his hair slicked down. When Evelyn walked into the room, his eyes went wide, and the most tender look washed over his face. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice cracking just a little. "So do you," she replied, and she meant it with all her heart. He'd never looked more handsome than he did right then. Reverend Walsh cleared his throat and began the ceremony. He started with a short prayer, his voice gentle and warm. Then he turned to them with kind eyes. "Marriage ain't just a legal paper or what's expected of y'all," he said. "It's a sacred promise before God. It's a promise that you will stand together come what may. It takes real courage and a whole lot of commitment. It means you're willing to put someone else's good right alongside your own. Caleb, Evelyn, do y'all come to this freely and with open hearts?" "We do," they said together. The Reverend smiled wide. "Then let's get on with it." Caleb roared. "Do you take Evelyn Ward to be your lawfully wedded wife? Do you promise to love her, honor her, and stand by her through thick and thin? Through all the days of your life?" Caleb's eyes were locked on Evelyn's. "I surely do," he said, his voice firm, "with every part of me." "Evelyn Ward, do you take Caleb Roar to be your husband? Do you promise to love him, honor him, and stand by his side?" Evelyn's voice was clear as a bell. "I do," she said, "with my whole heart." "The rings, if you please," said the Reverend. Ben stepped forward, looking mighty proud, and held out the rings. They were two simple gold bands Caleb had bought in town. He took one and gently slid it onto Evelyn's finger. His hand was steady, but his eyes were full of feeling. "With this ring I marry you. All I have is now yours. All that I am, I give to you." Then Evelyn took the other ring and put it on his hand. She felt the promise in its weight. "With this ring I marry you. All I have is now yours. All that I am, I give to you." "Well then," Reverend Walsh declared with a big grin, "by the power of God in this territory, I pronounce y'all husband and wife. Caleb, you can go on and kiss your bride." And Lord, did he ever. Right there in their own house with Ben cheering and Margaret dabbing at her eyes. He kissed her like she was a cool drink of water after a long, hard drought. When they finally parted, they were both grinning from ear to ear. Evelyn knew in her bones that she was finally right where she was supposed to be. Margaret shooed them onto the porch while she fixed up a wedding supper. They stood together in the soft afternoon light, his arm around her waist. They watched their land stretch out before them. "Mrs. Roar," Caleb said softly, trying out the name. "Evelyn Roar." "It sounds just right," she said with a smile. "No second thoughts?" he asked her. She laid her hand over his heart. "Not a single one, you? Only that it took me so long to find you. And that you had to go through so much," he said. "Maybe I had to walk through the fire," Evelyn said. "Maybe I had to lose it all to understand just how precious this life is with you and Ben. I won't ever take a single day for granted, Caleb. I promise you that." He kissed her forehead, soft and sweet. "We'll treasure it together, darling." Their wedding supper was simple, but it was full of joy. Margaret had roasted a chicken and made fresh biscuits. She'd even baked a cake that very morning. They ate, and laughed together as a new family. Ben kept them all entertained with his big stories, making everyone smile. As the sun finally set, Margaret and the Reverend got ready to head home. Margaret pulled Evelyn into a big hug. "You did good, girl," she whispered. "Real good. He's a fine fella, and you are gonna be happy here. I just know it." "Thank you," Evelyn whispered back, "for being my friend." "Honey, that's just what neighbors do," Margaret said. "Now you go on and be a wife to that man." Wished Caleb and Evelyn a good night, leaving them alone by the crackle and fire. The room got real quiet, filled with a mix of hope and jitters. "Evelyn," Caleb started, his voice a little shaky, "I want you to know, we can take our time. I know this has all happened mighty fast, so there ain't no rush." She walked right over and took his hands in hers. "Caleb, I know what marriage is about. And I'm ready to be your wife in every way, not because I have to, but because I want to." You could see the relief on his face. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I'm sure," she whispered. Then she rose up on her toes and gave him a kiss that was full of promise. He pulled her in close, his heart beating steady and strong against her. "Come with me," he said softly, leading her up the stairs to the room that was now theirs. It was a space they'd share for all the days to come. The room was simple, but Evelyn had added her own touches to make it a home. With fresh curtains and the smell of lavender, the place felt real peaceful. Margaret's grandmother's quilt lay on the bed, making the room feel like a sanctuary. In the warm lamplight, they were slow and tender with each other. He was so patient, and when they finally came together, it felt just like coming home. Afterwards, they laid all tangled up under that old wedding quilt. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "I love you too," she answered, feeling his arms hold her even tighter. Outside, the prairie wind was whistling and a lone coyote called out. But inside, two folks who'd been broken were finally put back together again. Evelyn drifted off to sleep, knowing deep in her heart that she was loved. She knew without a doubt that she was finally home. And down the hall, young Ben slept soundly for the first time in a long while. He felt that his family was whole again, and that everything was finally going to be all right. About 3 weeks later, winter hit with a vengeance, piling snow high against the barn. A fierce wind howled through the valley like a wounded creature. Evelyn woke before dawn to find Caleb already dressed, pulling on his heavy coat. "Where in the world are you going?" she asked, wrapping the quilt around her shoulders. "The cattle," he said, his voice grim. "I got to get them to shelter before this storm scatters them." "Well, I'm coming with you," she declared, throwing the covers back. "Evelyn, it's too dangerous. Out there, you can't see a thing. And the cold's just as bad," she cut in, already getting her warmest dress. "You said you needed help. Two of us are better than one. I'm not letting you face that blizzard alone." He looked ready to argue, but he knew that look in her eyes. "Fine, but Ben stays inside," Twee finally said. "He'll keep the fires burning and the coffee hot." "Deal," Evelyn agreed. They woke Ben and told him the plan. The boy just nodded, understanding how serious it was. "I'll keep things ready," he promised. "Y'all be careful now." Outside, the world was a white nightmare. Evelyn could barely see Caleb just a few feet ahead. The wind sliced right through her clothes. In minutes, her face was frozen and her fingers were numb inside her gloves. "Stay right on my heels," Caleb yelled over the howling wind. "Grab my coat. If we get split up, you head straight back. Don't look for me, you hear?" She nodded, gripping his heavy coat and the safety rope he'd tied around their waists. It was their lifeline if things got any worse. They trudged through the deep snow toward the pasture, and Evelyn felt a real fear rising up in her. This was the Montana winter she'd been warned about, the kind that didn't forgive mistakes. But Caleb moved like he knew every inch of this land, even blind, and she put her trust in him. The cattle were right where he figured, huddled in a corner with their backs to the wind. Snow was already piling up on them. Getting them to move was a pure struggle. Evelyn's throat was raw from yelling, and her legs burned from fighting the snow. But bit by bit, they pushed the herd toward the shelter of the barn. The barn and trees would block the worst of the wind. "That's the last of 'em," Caleb finally hollered. She could see the relief on his face, even with ice on his lashes. "Let's get inside before we freeze solid." The walk back to the house felt a whole lot longer. Evelyn's legs were shaking from the cold and the work. She stumbled more than once, but every time Caleb was right there to steady her. He kept her moving. When they finally fell through the door, Ben had a fire roaring and hot coffee ready. He took one look at them, covered in snow, and rushed to help. "Get out of them wet things," he ordered, sounding older than his years. "I got blankets warming by the fire for y'all." Evelyn's hands were shaking too much to work her buttons. Caleb's weren't much better, but they helped each other get down to dry clothes and into the warm blankets. The coffee burned all the way down, but that heat spreading through her felt like salvation itself. "That was a fool's errand," Caleb said after a while, but he wasn't mad. "We could have died out there." "But we didn't," Evelyn said back. "And the herd is safe. That's what's important. You're what's important," he said, his voice low and fierce. "More than any old cattle. If anything had happened to you out there, something could have happened to you if you'd gone by yourself," she cut in. "We're partners in this, Caleb. In all of it. That means the dangerous parts and the hard parts too. You don't get to shoulder all the risk just to protect me." He just stared at her for a good long while, then shook his head. It was hard to tell if he was put out or impressed, or maybe a bit of both. "You are the most hard-headed woman I have ever laid eyes on." "Well, I learned from the most hard-headed man," she fired right back. "And even with all this, the code, the danger, and being plumb tuckered out." A smile broke on both their faces. That storm raged on for 3 whole days. 3 days cooped up inside while the wind howled and the snow just kept piling up. On the second day, they woke up to find snowdrifts clear halfway up the windows, turning the whole house into a dim cave with just that snowy light filtering in. Caleb had to shovel a path just to get to the barn and feed the stock. And Lord, even that short walk was a real struggle. But inside, the house was cozy and warm. Evelyn was cooking while Ben did his schoolwork at the table, and Caleb kept busy mending harnesses and tools. In the evenings, they'd tell stories by the fire, played some simple games, and Caleb even taught Ben card tricks his own mama had showed him as a boy. And then at night, Evelyn would lie there in Caleb's arms, listening to that storm carry on outside, feeling so grateful for the sturdy walls around them, the warmth of their bed, and the safe little world they'd made together. On the fourth day, the storm finally gave up. They woke to pure silence. No wind, no falling snow, just the deep, heavy quiet of a world buried in white. When Caleb finally pushed the door open, they were looking at a solid wall of snow that had drifted up against the house. It took him a good hour just to dig a way out. But when they finally stepped outside, the view just took Evelyn's breath right away. Everything looked brand new. The whole ranch was sitting under a perfect blanket of pure white. The mountains off in the distance shined like they were carved right out of ice. The sky was so blue it almost hurt your eyes to look at it. The sun bounced off all that snow, making the whole world sparkle like it was covered in diamonds. "It's just beautiful," Evelyn whispered. "It's a killer," Caleb said. But you could hear he appreciated it too. "Come on, we better go check on the herd. Make sure none of them are in a bind." They spent the rest of the day digging out and checking on all the animals, sizing up the damage. They'd lost 3 chickens. The cold was just too much, even with the insulated coop. But the cattle made it through just fine. The barn was still standing strong, and the house had held up to the storm without a problem. All things considered, they'd been mighty lucky. Over the next few weeks, winter really dug its heels in. More storms rolled through, but none were quite as mean as that first one. The ranch became its own little world, cut off by all the snow from any neighbors. They didn't see a soul, didn't talk to anyone but each other, and somehow that just made their little family even tighter. Ben was just flourishing with Evelyn's teaching. He was going through his reading books at a pace that surprised both of them. He was a natural with numbers too. He could figure sums in his head quicker than you could blink, and always got it right. After supper in the evenings, Evelyn would do her sewing while Caleb and Ben played chess on an old board that had belonged to Caleb's daddy. Watching them hunched over that board, with their faces all serious and focused, Evelyn felt so content it nearly brought her to tears. This right here was family. This was home. This was everything she thought was gone for good when Edward passed. One evening, with Ben tucked in, Caleb took her hand by the fire. "Evelyn, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low and serious. She put down her sewing. "What is it, Caleb?" "I've been thinking about Ben's future. About him going to a real school, maybe even college, like you said. This ranch is doing better." Better than it has in years, and that's all thanks to you. We ain't rich, but we're getting by. I want to start putting money aside for his schooling, give him the chances I never had. Evelyn's heart just about burst for this hard-working man thinking about his nephew. Oh, Caleb, that's a wonderful idea, she said, her voice soft. And I reckon we can swing it. I've been keeping the books, and there's room. You've been keeping the books? Caleb looked at her, mighty surprised. Well, somebody had to, she teased. You're a cattleman, not a numbers man. Hope you don't mind. Mine, darling, I'm grateful. That's one less thing for me to worry my head over. He squeezed her hand. There's something else. I want to grow the herd this spring. Margaret Sullivan's got good breeding stock. Better stock means better prices. But it's a gamble. It means using our savings. Evelyn's mind went to work. How big a gamble? A fair one, a bad drought or a market crash. And we could lose it all. But if it goes right, he said, we could triple what we make in 3 years. Evelyn got quiet. She knew what it was like to lose everything. The thought of rising it all again made her stomach turn, but you have to risk it for the biscuit. What's your gut telling you, Caleb? She finally asked. Not your hopes, but your gut. He looked into the fire for a long minute. My gut says it's the right play. The market's good, and Margaret's cattle are top-notch. This is how we make this ranch something real. Then let's do it, she said without a second thought. Let's take the risk. Together. He pulled her in, kissing her forehead. You sure about that? I know how hard you worked for that nest egg. I'll work just as hard to make this work, she promised. This is how we build a real future for us, for Ben. We can't be scared all the time. We have to have faith we're strong enough to handle whatever comes our way. When did you get so dang brave? He whispered. When I married a man who made me feel like I was worth something. Something truly worth fighting for. As winter finally gave way to spring, the whole ranch began to wake up. Caleb and Evelyn were busy planning the expansion, while Ben was chomping at the bit to get outside and work. Then in early March, when the roads finally cleared, they got a surprise visitor. Margaret Sullivan came by with some news over coffee. There's a family from Sweden heading west, she said, but their wagon broke down and they're in a bad way. They're low on everything and the wife looks ready to have her baby any minute now. Reverend Walsh is looking for a place for them to stay. Before Margaret could finish, Evelyn spoke up. They can stay here. Caleb looked a little shocked. Evelyn, we don't even know them. Doesn't matter, she said. They need help, and we can give it. She told Margaret, tell the Reverend to bring them on over. The Anderson family showed up that afternoon. Carl, Ingrid, and their 3 little ones, all looking wore out. Ingrid was trying to hide the pain, but Evelyn saw it right away. She looked at Ingrid's hand on her belly and just knew. How far apart are your pains? Evelyn asked gently. Ingrid admitted they'd started that morning, not wanting to be a bother. Honey, you're not a burden, Evelyn said with a firm kindness. Ben, get their family settled. Caleb, you ride and fetch Margaret now. The house sprang into action. Evelyn had never delivered a baby herself, but she knew the basics from helping her mom and sister. As the day wore on, she found a strength inside her she never knew she had. Margaret arrived and took charge right away, calm as could be. She checked on Ingrid, said all was well, and put Evelyn to work with hot water and linens. Ben kept the scared Anderson Children Company in the main room. Their daddy Carl just paced back and forth, worried sick. Caleb stayed with Carl, keeping him steady, while Evelyn ran back and forth for Margaret. Then, just past midnight, they all heard it, a baby's cry. It was a strong, healthy cry. Margaret came out of the room looking tired but proud. You've got a daughter, she told Carl. A beautiful, healthy little girl. Just wonderfully. They're both doing fine. The relief that washed over Carl's face was so strong it made Evelyn's own eyes well up. This right here, she thought. This was what truly mattered. A new life, a family safe from harm, and help given when it was needed most. This was what it meant to be neighbors, to be more than just out for yourself. The Andersons ended up staying for 2 weeks while Ingrid got her strength back and Carl fixed up their wagon. In that time, the house that had been so quiet for months was suddenly filled with kids' laughter and a jumble of Swedish and English. The older Anderson children took a shine to Ben, teaching him their words while he taught them his. Ingrid and Evelyn grew close looking after the new baby, a little girl named Astrid, with just a fuzz of blonde hair and her mama's blue eyes. "Y'all saved us," Ingrid said one afternoon by the fire, with Astrid sleeping in her arms. "We had nowhere to turn, not a soul to help. If you hadn't taken us in." "Someone did the same for me once," Evelyn said softly. "Folks help each other out here. It's how we make it." When the Andersons finally set off again, heading west with a sound wagon and high spirits, the house felt awful quiet, but they'd left something important behind. A reminder that this ranch, this home, was more than a place for the three of them. It could be a safe harbor, a beacon of hope for folks who were lost. "You were something else," Caleb told Evelyn that night. "The way you took charge and made that family feel safe. I swear I have never been prouder of anyone in my whole life." "I was scared to death the entire time," Evelyn confessed. "What if something had gone wrong? What if I'd messed it all up?" "But you didn't," Caleb said. "You trusted your gut, and you helped bring a new life into this world. That's a powerful thing, darling." Evelyn snuggled up closer to him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart. "I've been doing some thinking," she said, picking her words carefully, "about children, about if that's something you'd want." She felt him go real still. Then his arms tightened around her. "Are you telling me what I think you're telling me?" "I don't know for sure yet," she said. "It's too soon to say, but my time is late, and I've been feeling poorly in the mornings. I just thought you ought to know it's possible, that we might be expecting." For a long moment, Caleb was silent, and a knot of worry tightened in her chest. Maybe he was scared of another baby, after what happened to Thomas's wife. "A baby," he finally breathed, his voice so full of awe and pure joy that all of Evelyn's fears just melted away. "We could be having a baby, Evelyn. I don't even have the words. It's scary and wonderful all at once," Evelyn finished for him. "And we'll handle it together just like we do everything else." He kissed her then, a long, deep kiss, and when they came up for air, they were both smiling. "When will you know for sure, Boam?" he asked. "Another few weeks, I reckon. I don't want to tell Ben a thing till we're certain." "But Caleb," she said, her voice dropping, "I'm scared. After what happened with Sarah, after watching Thomas lose everything when she passed in childbirth, I'm just plain terrified of what might happen." "I'm scared too," Caleb admitted. "But the thought of a baby with you, well, it's a dream come true." And sure enough, 2 weeks later, Margaret confirmed it. Evelyn was pregnant, with the baby due in the fall. The older woman declared Evelyn strong and healthy, telling Caleb, "Now you make sure she rests." He promised he would. Telling young Ben was one of the happiest moments of their lives. They sat him down after supper. "Ben," Evelyn said gently, "you're going to be a big brother." The boy's face broke into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. "Really? A real baby?" "That's right," Caleb said warmly. "Being a big brother is a mighty important job." Ben was bursting with excitement, asking if he could help take care of the new baby. "Oh, we're counting on it," Evelyn said, pulling him into a great big hug. That night on the porch, Caleb quietly said, "A year ago, I was just barely surviving. Now look at us. I have a wife I love, a happy nephew, and our own baby on the way." "Look what we've built," Evelyn whispered, as she placed his hand on her stomach. "I love you," Caleb said, his voice thick with emotion. "You put my whole world back together." "You did the same for me," she replied softly. "You gave me a home when I had nothing left at all." They just stood there together in the quiet dark, holding on to the beautiful future they were building, ever laid eyes on. "For real? A real live baby? He'll be mine too, kinda." "Not kinda," Caleb told him, "for certain. You're gonna be a big brother. Now that's a mighty important job." "Is it gonna be a boy or a girl?" Ben asked. "Well, we won't know till the little one gets here," Evelyn said. "Does it make a difference to you?" Ben thought on it for a minute. "Nah, either one would be just fine. Can I help take care of him?" "We're sure counting on it," Evelyn said, pulling him in for a big old hug. "We're gonna need your help something fierce." That night, after Ben had finally gone to bed, still chattering on about names and what he'd teach his new brother or sister, Caleb and Evelyn stood on the porch together just watching the stars come out. "I never figured I'd have this," Caleb said softly. A wife I love, a nephew who's doing so good, and a baby on the way. A year ago, I was barely hanging on, just trying to keep my head above water and not let Ben down too bad. Now just look at us. You were never failing, Evelyn said. You were doing the best you could with the tough hand you were dealt. But you're right, look at us now. Look at what we built. She placed his hand on her belly, still flat, but holding their whole future, their hope. The living proof that two broken folks could come together and make something whole and beautiful. I love you, Caleb said. I love you so much, it plumb scares me sometimes. You came into my life when it was all falling apart, and you helped me piece it back together. You made me believe in a future and family and happiness again. You did the very same for me, Evelyn said. You saw something good in a woman who showed up in rags. You gave me a chance when I had nothing left to offer but myself. You made me believe I deserved to be loved, to be happy, to have a real home. They stood there together in the quiet of the spring night, feeling the warmth of behind them. The house stood peaceful, with young Ben inside dreaming of being a big brother. All around them, the rebuilt ranch stretched out, strong and ready for what was next. And in Evelyn's womb, a new life was just beginning, a new chapter to their story. A story that was becoming something more than they ever dared to hope for, a real family story. It was about second chances and finding the grit to rebuild after everything had fallen to pieces. Their story was a long way from over here, but this part, this hard-won, beautiful part, was just perfect. Spring gave way to a hot Texas summer, and the new cattle Caleb and Evelyn had planned for arrived. 20 head of prime stock from Margaret's ranch came in May, meant to secure their future. Caleb worked from sunup to sundown, fixing fences and getting the barn ready for the new animals. Evelyn, even with her growing belly, was right there with him, managing the books and keeping things humming. By the middle of summer, there was no hiding her condition. Her dresses got too snug, so she took to sewing new ones with plenty of room to grow. She tired out quicker, but Lord, she had a glow about her. She was truly happy, in a way she'd never been before. Young Ben had become her little protector, always insistent on helping his mama. He'd do his chores without a word and read to her when she was too worn out to sew. He talked nonstop about the baby, making all sorts of plans. His excitement was so sweet it could make you tear up. You think the baby will like fishing? He asked. I'm getting real good, and I could teach him. I'm sure they'll love that, Evelyn said, stroking his hair. You're going to be a wonderful big brother. Then came August, when the heat was a heavy blanket and Evelyn was big and uncomfortable. That's when trouble rode in on 3 horses. Caleb saw him coming across the north pasture, and the way they were sizing up his land made his hackles rise. He strode back to the house, getting there just as the men were swinging down from their saddles. Evelyn had seen them too and was already on the porch. She had one hand on her belly, with little Ben standing guard right beside her. Afternoon, the leader said, but his cold eyes didn't match his polite tone. Name's Carson. These fellows are Miller and Dutch. We heard you might be selling some prime cattle. We're not selling, Caleb said flatly, planting himself between the strangers and his family. Carson's smile spread, but it was all teeth. Don't be so hasty. We pay a fair price. It'd sure be a shame to take good money. I told you we ain't selling, Caleb said again. Y'all can head on out now. Carson's friendly face soured. Well, that ain't too neighborly now, is it? We rode a long way and don't take kindly to wasting our time. You might want to think on that. Maybe y'all should just leave, Evelyn called from the porch, her voice steady, but Caleb saw the fear in her eyes. You heard my husband? We have nothing to sell. Miller, a stocky fellow with a mean scar, just laughed. Your husband, that's sweet. A man with a pregnant wife and a little boy to look after has a whole lot to lose. The threat was plain as day, and rage boiled up in Caleb. But before he could move, a rifle clicked behind the strangers. Margaret Sullivan's voice cut through the air, sharp as a tack. It also makes a man smart, smart enough to have good neighbors. Now, I reckon you 3 ought to get on your horse and ride on before things get ugly. She stood at the edge of the yard, her rifle aimed square at Carson's chest. Behind her stood 2 of her ranch hands, both armed and ready. Carson's jaw clenched tight, He knew he was outgunned. "This ain't over," he snarled, swinging back onto his horse. "We'll be back for sure, yeah. Y'all come on back. We'll be waiting," Margaret promised. "Now get off this land before I decide you're trespassing." The men finally rode off, and only when they were out of sight did Margaret lower her rifle. She walked to the house, her hands shaking just a little. "Much obliged," Caleb said. "How'd you know?" "Saw 'em ride past my place. Didn't like the look of 'em one bit. Figured they were headed this way. Glad I trusted my gut." She looked over at Evelyn, who had a hand on her belly. "You all right, honey?" "I'm fine," Evelyn answered, though her voice shook some. "Just spooked is all." "Who were they?" "Rustlers, I'd bet," Margaret said, her face turning grim. "Heard tell of 'em in these parts, stealing stock and worse. They watch a place, looking for who's an easy target. Then they come back at night. Sometimes it's cattle, sometimes it's more." A chill ran down Caleb's spine. A place with a pregnant woman and a boy was the perfect target. He knew they fit the bill. "We got to get ready," he said. "If they come back." "When they come back," Margaret corrected. "Men like that don't quit easy. We need to be ready for 'em." Well, they spent the whole afternoon fortifying the ranch. Margaret's men helped Caleb board up the weak windows, clear better sight lines, and check all their firearms. Even with a baby on the way, Evelyn gathered supplies, extra bullets, food, and water. She got the medicine chest ready, just in case. Ben knew things were serious. He stayed quiet and did whatever he was told, without a single complaint. As the sun started to dip low, Margaret and her men got ready to head on home. "Ranch. I'll have someone check on y'all tomorrow," she said. "If you see any trouble, fire 3 shots in the air. We will hear it and come running." After they drove off, Caleb, Evelyn, and Ben ate a supper filled with tension. The house was heavy with silence. Ben went to bed early without a word, and Caleb went around checking everything. He rechecked the locks on the doors and the boards on the windows. He kept his rifle right by the front door. "Come on to bed, honey," Evelyn finally said after his 3rd time around the house. "You need to rest to stay sharp." "I'm not sure I can sleep," he told her honestly, "not knowing they might come back for you and Ben because of me." "Because of us," Evelyn said firmly. "This is our ranch and our family. We will face this together, like always." They lay in the dark, still in their clothes, jumping at every little sound the old house made. The wind rustled the trees, and a far-off owl called out. Caleb held that rifle right across his lap. Evelyn kept her hand on his, her touch a small comfort in a whole lot of fear. It was just after midnight. That is when they heard it. The soft sound of horses, men talking low, and the barn door creaking open. "They are here," Caleb whispered, his heart pounding like a drum. "You stay with Ben. Lock yourselves in his room. Barricade the door," he pleaded, "and do not come out, no matter what you hear me doing." His voice cracked. "Please, Evelyn, I need to know you and Ben are safe. I cannot think straight otherwise." She gave him a quick, hard kiss. "Be careful. You come back to us." "Always," he promised her. He watched her block the door with furniture. Then he slipped downstairs, rifle in hand, listening for anything. Through the window, he saw 3 shadows moving around in the barn, just like he had figured. They were going for the cattle first, likely planning to load up before they dealt with the house. Caleb stepped to the front door, raised his rifle high, and fired 3 loud shots into the night air for Margaret. He then took cover behind a heavy, overturned table and just waited. The shots brought the men running from the barn. But they were not running away. They were coming straight for the house, with their own weapons drawn. Caleb saw the flash from a muzzle. He heard the bullet thud hard into the doorframe right next to his head. "We can do this easy or hard," Carson's voice hollered from the darkness. "Give us what we want, or it will get ugly." "You are not taking a single thing from this ranch," Caleb shouted back. "Help is already on the way for you boys. You have got maybe 20 minutes before you are surrounded." Carson just laughed. 20 minutes is plenty of time for us." More shots rang out. Caleb returned fire, aiming carefully to keep their heads down. He had served 2 years in the Army before his father passed, so he knew how to handle himself in a fight. But he was still one man against 3 of them, and they were spreading out, trying to get around the sides of the house. A window upstairs shattered, and Caleb's blood ran ice cold. They were trying to break in from all over. Then he heard Evelyn scream, not in pain, but in pure fury. It was followed by the mighty boom of a shotgun from upstairs. Armed herself was defending Ben's room, and Caleb felt a surge of pride and terror in equal measure. His wife, 8 months pregnant, was fighting back while he tried to hold the ground floor. The battle seemed to last forever, but was probably only minutes. Caleb fired until his first rifle was empty, switched to his second, fired again. One of the attackers, Dutch he thought, went down with a cry, clutching his leg. Carson and Miller kept coming, but their movements were more cautious now, more uncertain. And then, like salvation itself, he heard horses approaching at a gallop, heard Margaret's voice shouting orders, heard the thunder of multiple weapons being cocked and aimed. "Drop your weapons," Margaret commanded, her voice carrying across the yard with absolute authority. "You're surrounded and outgunned. Drop them now or we shoot." For a moment, Caleb thought Carson might be stupid enough to fight. But then he saw the man take in the situation. Margaret and at least 6 ranch hands, all armed ready, and reason prevailed over pride. His weapon hit the ground, followed by Miller's. Dutch was already down, groaning and bleeding. "Caleb, you all right in there?" Margaret called. "Fine," he shouted back, his voice rough. "Evelyn and Ben, we're okay," Evelyn called from upstairs, and Caleb felt his knees go weak with relief. "The baby's okay, we were all okay." 2 of Margaret's hands tied up the would-be rustlers while another rode for the territorial marshal. Margaret herself came to the door, and Caleb let her in, his hands still shaking with adrenaline and fear. "You did good," she said, held them off until help arrived. "That takes courage." "Evelyn fought too," Caleb said, defended Ben's room with the shotgun. 8 months pregnant, and she... His voice broke. Evelyn appeared at the top of the stairs, Ben beside her, both of them pale but unharmed. Caleb took the stairs 3 at a time and pulled them both into his arms, holding them so tight he was afraid he might hurt them, but unable to let go. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered, "when I heard that shotgun, when I knew you were in danger." "We're fine," Evelyn said, but she was crying now, all the fear and adrenaline finally breaking through. "We're all fine. It's over." The marshal arrived at dawn and took the 3 men into custody. Dutch would need a doctor for his leg. Caleb's bullet had shattered his kneecap, but he'd live to stand trial. Carson and Miller were wanted in 3 territories for rustling, robbery, and assault. They'd be going to prison for a long time. As the sun rose over the ranch, painting everything in shades of gold and rose, Caleb stood on the porch with his arm around Evelyn, watching the marshal's wagon disappear down the road. Ben leaned against them both, exhausted but safe. "I never want to go through anything like that again," Evelyn said quietly. "Neither do I," Caleb agreed. "But if we have to, if danger comes again, I know now that we can handle it together." "You were incredible last night, Evelyn. Terrifying and incredible." "I was protecting our family," she said simply. "I'd do it again in a heartbeat." Margaret stayed through the morning, helping them clean up the damage, board up the broken window, assess what needed repair. As she was preparing to leave, she pulled Evelyn aside. "You're due soon," she said. "That kind of stress last night, it could bring on labor early. I want you to take it easy the next few weeks." "You rest now," Margaret said. "You just holler if you feel anything at all." Evelyn promised she would. "And Margaret," Evelyn added, "thank you for everything. You saved our lives." "That's just what neighbors do," Margaret said, her words echoing Evelyn's from long ago. "We look out for one another." The next few weeks passed in a blur of getting ready for the baby. Ben's birthday was coming up, and soon after the baby would be here. Evelyn got bigger and bigger, hardly able to move, doing nothing much but waiting. Caleb, meanwhile, finished fixing up the ranch and made it safer than ever. He knew he was building something real, a home worth fighting for. Ben turned 9 on a crisp morning, and they celebrated with a cake Evelyn managed to bake. He got a new fishing rod from Caleb and a set of books from his mama. Margaret joined them and gave him a beautiful pocket knife with his initials on the handle. "You're nearly a man now," she told him. "This here is a tool and a responsibility. You take care of it, and it'll take care of you." Ben held that knife like it was solid gold. Evelyn felt tears welling up, seeing how much her boy had grown and how far they'd all come. Then 2 weeks later, on a pretty autumn afternoon, it was time. Evelyn was at the stove stirring soup when her water broke. The baby was coming 3 weeks early, but she knew in her heart it was going to be all right. "Caleb," she called, her voice steady as a rock. "It's time. Send Ben to go get Margaret." The next few hours were a complete whirlwind. Margaret showed up and took charge, her confidence a comfort, coaching Evelyn through the pain. She was a steady presence, offering comfort when it all felt like too much to bear. Caleb stayed right by her side, holding her hand and whispering words of love. She'd figured she might want him to wait outside like most men did, but when it came down to it, she couldn't let him go. She needed his strength. The labor was harder than she ever imagined, and the hours just dragged on and on. There were moments Evelyn truly believed she couldn't do it, couldn't take one more wave of pain. "I can't," she gasped, but Margaret's voice cut through the haze, firm and strong. "Yes, you can. You're strong enough for this. You survived losing everything and built this life from nothing. You fought off rustlers 8 months pregnant. You can sure as heck bring this baby into the world. Now push." And so she did. Evelyn pushed with every last bit of strength she had in her, built on surviving hard times, with a heart full of love for Caleb, Ben, and this new baby she'd yet to meet but already adored. As the sun went down, painting the room all warm, a strong, healthy cry filled the air. "It's a little girl," Bissy, Margaret said, her voice choked up, placing the tiny bundle right on Evelyn's chest. Evelyn looked down at her perfect pink and wrinkled daughter, who had a head full of dark hair just like her own, and felt her whole world change in an instant. "Hello there," she whispered through happy tears. "Well, hello, little one. We've been waiting on you." She saw Caleb was crying too, tears silently rolling down his face. He just looked at his wife and new daughter with so much wonder. "She's just perfect," he whispered. "Can I come in?" Ben's little voice called from the doorway, anxious but excited. "Come on in," Evelyn called, and in he came, his face a mix of worry and glee. He walked up slow, his eyes big as saucers, staring at the baby in her arms. "She's so tiny," he whispered. "They're all tiny at first," Margaret said with a smile. "She's lucky to have a good big brother like you." Then Ben asked, "What's her name?" Caleb and Evelyn shared a look. They'd talked about names, but wanted to wait. "Grace," Evelyn said, knowing it was right. "Grace Sarah Roar. For my mama, and for yours, Ben." "I think it's perfect," Caleb said, his voice all thick with emotion. Ben reached out a finger and gently touched the baby's hand, her little fingers wrapped right around his, and Ben's whole face just lit up. "She's holding my hand," he breathed. "Course she likes you," Evelyn said. "You're her brother." Margaret stayed till she knew Mom and baby were fine. Then she gathered up her things. At the door, she paused and took in the sight of Caleb with his arm around Evelyn. Ben was curled up close, just staring at that baby, who was sleeping soundly in her mama's arms. "Y'all have built something real beautiful here," Margaret said softly. After she left, the family of four just sat quietly as the last light faded. The stars started to pop out, and there wasn't much need for talking. Words just couldn't hold what they were all feeling. This family, built from broken pieces, had made it through everything and was finally whole. Then little Grace stirred in Evelyn's arms, and Evelyn marveled at how the baby just knew what to do. Caleb watched with a tender look, while Ben whispered 100 questions about babies, when she could play. "She'll need some time to grow," Evelyn said, smiling at him. "But soon she'll be your shadow. You're going to be her hero, Ben." "I'll teach her everything," Ben promised. "Fishing, riding, and her letters." "She's a lucky little gal to have you," Caleb said, ruffling the boy's hair. "We all are." That night, with Ben and baby Grace fast asleep in their beds, Caleb and Evelyn just laid there in the quiet, listening to their daughter breathe. "A year ago," Caleb said softly, "I was a broken man, certain my chance at happiness was long gone. And now look, a wife I cherish, 2 children, a ranch that's doing well. It feels like a dream." "It's no dream," Evelyn said. "It's real. It's what we built together. We earned this through all the fear and struggle. This is our life now, Caleb." "Do you ever think about that first day?" he asked. "When you got off that train, looking so tired, All the time, Evelyn admitted. I was so scared you'd take one look and send me packing. Scared I'd always be alone, but now I know I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, she added. I believe sometimes you gotta lose everything to find what really matters. I know that the absolute worst times can lead you straight to the best ones. Love ain't about fancy things. It's about showing up every day and building something together. Caleb pulled her in close, being careful of her sore body. I love you, Evelyn roared, more than I ever knew a man could. I love you too, she whispered. Thank you for seeing some good in a woman who had nothing. Thank you for giving me a home, a family. No, he replied. Thank you for staying, for fighting for us. Thank you for turning this house into a real home. They laid there in the dark, listening to the ranch settle down for the night. Outside, the stars shined on, big and bright in the Texas sky, and inside, a family slept, held together by love and the grit to protect it all. The months that came after were equal parts beautiful and bone-tiring. Grace was a good baby, but she still needed care around the clock. Evelyn tackled motherhood with grit, learning as she went and getting help from Margaret. Ben was the proudest big brother, always wanting to hold the baby or show her his treasures. And Caleb was right there with them, a devoted father getting up in the dead of night. He'd tend to the feeding and walk the floor with a fussy grace, just looking at her with pure wonder. Seeing that made Evelyn fall for him all over again. The ranch was doing better than ever. The new stock improved the herd something fierce, and their earnings that fall nearly doubled. The accounts Evelyn kept showed they were building a good life, with plenty for Ben's schooling. When winter rolled around again, they were ready for it. The house was snug, the barn was solid, and they were well stocked with food and firewood. They weathered the first real blizzard of December with ease, gathered around the fire as a family. Caleb would read aloud while Evelyn nursed Grace, and Ben practiced his letters. One of those evenings, Ben looked up from his slate with a question on his mind. Will y'all tell Grace how you met? He asked. How Aunt Evelyn came here with nothing? Evelyn and Caleb shared a look, a silent understanding of how far they had come. We sure will, honey, Evelyn said, when she's old enough to understand the whole story. We'll tell her how I arrived in rags, and your uncle saw something in me anyway. And how we built this family from broken pieces, 'cause love is always worth the fight. And we'll tell her about you, son, Caleb added, looking right at Ben, how you were the one who made her mama feel welcome and made our family whole. Later that night, Evelyn sat by the fire working on a special quilt, a history quilt she called it, with squares representing their journey together. There was a piece of her first dress and a scrap from Caleb's old work shirt. In the very center, she stitched a piece of the tattered dress she'd worn when she first arrived. She kept those rags not to remember being poor, but to remember she was a survivor. Caleb sat beside her, carefully carving a little set of wooden animals for Grace, something made by her daddy's own hands, something she could treasure forever. Are you happy? He asked, his voice soft, not looking up from his work. Evelyn put down her needle and truly considered it. After all the hardship, was she happy? Here, with this quiet, steady man and the two children who had captured her heart. Yes, she said, and the word felt as true and peaceful as coming home. I'm happy. Not because life is perfect, but because we built this life together, you and me. Every single day I choose to be here. I choose to love you and this family. That kind of happiness, the kind you have to fight for, well, that's the most real kind there is. He pulled her in, kissing her sweetly. I'm happy too, he said. Happier than I ever reckoned I'd be. You saved me, Evelyn. All of us. We saved each other, she corrected him softly. That's how it works. That's what family means. Well, the years went by and the ranch grew right along with their family. Ben went off to school. He later went to university in Helena for a law degree, just like Evelyn always knew he could. But he always came back. Every summer he'd help out and dote on his sister Grace, and later on, little Rose, born 3 years after. Rose had Caleb's blue eyes and her mama's dark hair. Grace grew up a spirited, curious little thing. She was always asking a million questions. She learned to read from her mother and to ride from her father. Ben taught her how to fish, and they all taught her to be brave. That quilt Evelyn started just kept on growing. New squares were added for every big moment, Ben's graduation, Grace's first steps, the day Rose was born. She put in a square for the year the ranch finally turned a profit, and when Ben came home a lawyer with a fiancée. And through it all, Caleb and Evelyn stood side by side, true partners in every sense of the word. They protected the life they'd built from pure dust. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Caleb took her back. He took her to the rise where he'd proposed, where they stood that one evening before the wedding and just talked. "Do you remember what I told you that night?" he asked, pulling her close. The two of them just stood there, watching the sun set over a ranch that was bigger than their wildest dreams. "You said you loved me," Evelyn remembered. "You said I'd helped you rebuild everything." "Well, I was wrong," Caleb said. When she looked at him, surprised, he just smiled. "I didn't need you to help me rebuild. I needed you to build something completely new with me. Something better. A real family. A real home. You didn't just fix what was broken, Evelyn. You made something that wasn't ever there to begin with." She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling his steady strength, that deep down contentment. Their love had been tested and proven true. "We made it together," she said. "That's the important part. It ain't about who saved who. It's that we chose each other every single day, no matter what. That's what makes all this real." Below them, their ranch was spread out in the golden light. The house with its warm windows, the barn standing strong, cattle in the pastures, and the garden all in neat rows. And somewhere in that house, their girls were probably fussing over something small or reading a book together. They were living the kind of childhood both Evelyn and Caleb had fought so hard to give them. "I still think about that day you arrived," Caleb said, his voice low. "How you looked on that platform in nothing but rags. How everyone whispered and judged. I came so close to letting their words get the best of me, to sending you away. Instead of seeing you for who you really were." "What stopped you?" Evelyn asked, a question she'd never dared ask before. "Your eyes," he said, plain and simple. "You were wearing rays, looking half-starved, but I saw the fight in your eyes. Every last thing you owned in a little bag that weighed nothing. But your eyes, they weren't broken. Tired, sad, and weary, but not beaten, not broken. I saw a real strength in those eyes, and courage, and a stubbornness a mile wide. And I thought maybe someone with eyes like that is just what this broken-down ranch, this broken man and this wounded little boy need." "I was terrified," Evelyn admitted. "Just plain terrified you'd see right through me, that you'd figure out I was just putting on a brave face. To be strong when really I was barely holding myself together." "But you weren't pretending," Caleb said. "That's what I finally understood. You weren't pretending to be strong. You were choosing to be strong, which is a whole lot harder and a whole lot more real. Every single day you chose to keep going, to keep working, to keep on hoping. That ain't pretending. That's courage." They stood there together as the stars began to pop out one by one. The very same stars that had looked down on their first talk on this porch, their wedding night, every important moment of all their years together. "If you could go back," Caleb asked real quiet, "knowing everything that was coming, the hard work, the danger, all the struggles, would you still get on that train? Would you still come out here?" Evelyn didn't hesitate one bit. "Yes," she said 1,000 times. "Yes, because this life, this family, this love, it's worth every single thing it costs to go on here. Every moment of fear and pain and struggle led me right to this moment, standing here with you, with our children sleeping safe inside that house, with a whole future stretched out in front of us. How in the world could I regret any of it?" He kissed her then, soft and deep, the kind of kiss between two people who knew each other's souls, who chose each other through thick and thin, and who built a love that would last them a lifetime and then some. When they finally got back to the house, they found Ben had come for a visit. His bride-to-be, Sarah, was right there with him, and the girls were showing her all their little treasures and just a chattering about the wedding. The whole house was filled with noise and laughter and life, and Evelyn just stood in the doorway for a minute, soaking it all in. This beautiful, rowdy, perfect family she never even dared to dream she could ever have. Caleb came up right beside her, sliding his arm around her waist. And they just stood there watching their family, their children, their whole future playing out right in front of them. Thank you, he said real soft, for what felt like the thousandth time since they'd gotten hitched. And like every time before, she knew he meant it with his entire heart. Thank you, she answered back, just like she always did, and she meant it just as much. In that very moment, standing in the doorway of the home they'd built together, Evelyn Rohr understood something deep down and true. That sometimes the end of one story is really just the start of a brand new one. That sometimes you have to lose something to find something better. And arriving with empty hands just means you have room to build everything. She'd stepped off that train in nothing but rags, plumb desperate and scared. And a good-hearted cowboy had seen her worth when no one else did. He'd given her a chance, and Lord knows she'd given him hope. And together they built something that neither one of them could have ever made by themselves. A family, a home, a true love story for the ages. And as the years kept on rolling by, as Ben built his own law practice and married that sweet Sarah, as Grace and Rose grew into fine young women, and as the grandkids eventually came along to fill that house with new life and giggles, that old quilt Evelyn had started so long ago was still folded at the foot of their bed, its edges all frayed from years of use, the colors faded with time. But every last stitch was still holding strong, just like the love that made it, just like the family that built it, and just like the story that would be told and passed down for generations. About a woman who showed up with nothing, and a man who saw everything in her. About all the broken pieces that were made whole again. It was a love that proved the best things in life are worth fighting for, worth building up, and worth believing in. Even when it seems like you ought to just give up. This here was their story, and a mighty fine one at that.